As we begin with some major news as the president is taking a very concrete step that relates to his public vows for revenge and in some cases potential abuse of government authority. And so this is Donald Trump looking backwards towards January 6th, tapping a key prosecutor at DOJ, what they call the D.C. U.S. attorney, who was Trump appointed, who is going to look backwards and open a new review. As a prosecutor, this could involve looking at documents, or it could involve criminal activities, trials, prosecutions, right? That's what prosecutors often do, of the DOJ's January 6 cases. And this is courtesy of a big report in the Wall Street Journal, NBC News confirming it since the Journal scoop. It comes a week into the second term. And Donald Trump began by doing something that showed exactly where he stands, siding with violent criminals, convicts, convicted seditionists over the United States government in its nonpartisan form, over police, when he freed all those January 6 defendants and convicts. It's something that is still playing out across the country, and Trump has vowed retribution. So what we're seeing, both in that almost unprecedented embrace of people convicted of sedition, of attacking officers later died after January 6, after those interactions, and then this, today, the news of opening a new case to look backwards. For what purpose? For what plans? Threatening to jail people who did investigate the January 6 committee, who did take, for example, testimony from those officers. Now, remember, President Biden left office also doing something unusual that he said was important, trying to insulate some people from what they viewed as credible potential abuse of government power to prosecute, for example, the people, as mentioned, who investigated January 6th. All of this playing out now.
Honestly, they should go to jail.
So you think Liz Cheney should go to jail?
For what they did.
Everyone on the committee, you think?
I think everybody.
That's just some of what he said. That was, of course, after the election. That was a president-elect speaking with the full incoming powers. Now, Cheney may be pardoned as one of the Jan 6 House investigators, but remember, Jack Smith and other individuals, no pardon there. And this new Trump prosecutor has described some of what happened in that case, like the use of obstruction, as a type of failure, and views this as a special inquiry. The Supreme Court did push back on some aspects of how prosecutors approach this case. It gets a little technical, but it had to do with using one law that was more for potentially financial crimes and related obstruction and applying it here. Now, Ed Martin, this new Trump figure, is also a conservative activist. And he has worked with a group that defends, legally and otherwise, those January 6 individuals. He also is associated with something called, you might recall, Stop the Steal, which, although political activity is, of course, widely First Amendment protected, you can say all kinds of things, but Stop the Steal often refers to people who are lying about what happened in 2020. Trump lost. They call it a steal because they publicly have claimed he didn't lose. Now, you have the right to say that in many forums, although not, for example, in the voting booth. If you're certifying election results, elector fraud, you can't reverse what people did in the voting booth. He also spoke on what became, what we now know was the eve of the convicted sedition, now convicted and pardoned sedition of the 6th. This was January 5th, the eve of that.
A fight that will go tonight and tomorrow and the next day and the day after, and it won't stop. What they're stealing is not just an election. It's our future, and it's our republic, and that's why we'll never stop. We'll never stop fighting, because we will stop the steal. Stop the steal. Stop the steal.
Legally, that would be called at a minimum a conflict of interest. An individual who was engaging completely lawfully there. What I just showed you was political speech. You can give the speech, but engaging in the events on the eve of and surrounding and then advocating for those activities. And now, in the Trump administration, this is the individual being tapped to review it. And so that raises problems for him, for the Justice Department, for the Trump administration, and in a land of laws, for any future court review. If they do try to go forward with cases, for example, prosecuting people, this will be one of the problems they may face, which is the review of the prosecutor and whether he is on the level, nonpartisan, etc. Even if, as I'm careful to note, he can have whatever public views and speeches as a matter of a citizen. Now, Fox News reported, NBC has confirmed that the DOJ has now ousted a dozen officials who worked for Jack Smith the acting attorney general saying they could not be trusted to implement President Trump's agenda. And then there is a move that Trump doesn't want you to know about that was buried on Friday night. If you have followed American life, politics, and news in any of the Trump eras, the first Trump term, the period of the last 4 years or so where he was fighting off various legal reviews and then running for president, and now this second Trump term, you're probably familiar with this move. For all of the talk online on social media where Trump allies have said they're going to boost his stories, there's the Trump show and his focus. And lately it has been about immigration, about the inauguration, about tariff wars. That's what they're pushing. But they're also doing things that they're not apparently proud of, that they're doing them and wanting to hide them. And Donald Trump knows PR and TV, and he tried to bury this from perhaps you, from people in the country, from viewers and citizens, by doing this thing late Friday night, ousting not 1 or 2 or 3, but 18 watchdogs, what they call inspectors general. These are the nonpartisan individuals empowered in our government to look out for you, the citizen and taxpayer, against political shenanigans of any type, Democratic or Republican. Some call it a legally murky move. Democrats in the House say they have the evidence to argue it's actually allegedly unlawful. And I want to be clear, many of these individuals who Donald Trump is ousting, again, remember I said it doesn't have to be a partisan thing, many of them are Republicans, some appointed by Donald Trump in his first term. They're still at work because Joe Biden, whatever you think of his record, didn't try to oust everyone who'd ever worked for Donald Trump. In fact, there are many government rules against exactly that type of thing at the career and nonpartisan level. These are independent watchdogs. They deal with waste, fraud, abuse. And if you're following what's going on in government or the country, not from a partisan red-blue perspective, you probably remember these watchdogs, sometimes called IGs as inspectors general, come up in all sorts of controversies. We've seen many Democratic administrations mad at the IG because they point out something, waste or fraud. Jim Comey, for example, got a scathing IG report because of things he did going all the way back, if you remember all that far, to 2016. Then later, there were many Democrats who embraced Jim Comey for other things he said that he argued were from his true experience about Trump. But the point is not red or blue. The point is these are empowered individuals protected with an extra layer from the Congress with often bipartisan votes, precisely so there's somebody inside the agency looking out for you and the public interest separate from whoever's doing the partisan leadership. One White House official now says, we're cleaning house of what doesn't work for us. Now, this is unusual. IGs not only tend to go across administrations, like I mentioned, the Trump-era ones are there because they lasted through 4 years of Biden, but also the laws require certain rules over how they can be purged, fired, and the notice for Congress. And that's precisely because if they're going to hold, say, the Pentagon accountable for everything, including potential criticism and abuse by Pentagon officials, then they might not be so popular in the Pentagon or in news that comes out that's negative for whatever the administration might be. Here was Senator Schiff.
To write off this clear violation of law by saying, well, technically he broke the law. Yeah, he broke the law. And not just any law, but a law meant to crowd out waste, fraud, and abuse.
Now, let's look at the evidence. This statute, which has passed at times with bipartisan support, states any president must communicate in writing these real reasons. They can't just be made up, but an actual reasoning not later than 30 days before a removal or transfer of these individuals. And a nonpartisan report from the congressional arm of the Library of Congress that does the research says President Trump's January action appears to be a, quote, direct challenge to the enforceability of Congress's removal procedures under the IG Act. That is sort of diplomatic legalese, government jargon for saying it looks like he broke this rule. Now, I want to be clear, and I've mentioned this before, I'm going to mention it tonight in fairness to everyone. Breaking a statute about, say, government staffing is different than, say, a criminal law. So there's a hierarchy here. No one is saying that this is some new crime in and of itself. What they are saying, what the Congressional Research Service, which is nonpartisan, is stating is that it appears the way the Trump administration, through the president, the way they have ousted these people who do this nonpartisan work seems to be a challenge or violate the rules. They certainly haven't given the written notice, and that's suspicious. And that's a problem if this is a precursor to what else is happening right now. the opening of a new case to look backwards, to fixate on January 6th. Legally, there are all these problems with the rule of law. Politically, it's quite striking that Donald Trump is putting so much emphasis, effort, even taking on political heat, criticism, for these things that are about rerunning his review of convicted crimes and other malfeasance related to efforts to steal the last election that he lost in 2020. This isn't about the price of eggs. It's not even about immigration. And it's a big tell.